You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. The phone's cold numerals declared 11:47 p.m., precisely when the lift shuttered, suspending itself in the void between the 32nd and 33rd levels. My thumb jabbed the brassy emergency lozenge. Silence answered. No klaxon, no crackled voice from some distant panel. Merely the profound quiet of mechanics stalled. Then, the floor indicator, a usually placid digital eye, began a feverish cycle through integers alien to this 40-story monolith. I am Arthur Finch, tethered to the digital entrails of Omnicorp Solutions as IT support. Freedom should have claimed me hours prior, yet a server migration, that intricate dance of data, held me captive. Now, solitude shared this metal box with me, my gaze locked on the impossible ascent flashing above. 54, 67, 83. Motion returned, not the familiar vertical heave, but a queasy lateral slide, a physics-defying shunt that churned my gut. When the steel doors parted, the vista wasn't Omnicorp. It was a scene dredged from decades past, an office swathed in brown shag carpet thick as moss, hulking beige terminals squatted on utilitarian metal desks. The air hung thick, acrid with a ghost of stale cigarettes. A woman, crowned with an improbable volume of hair and armored in shoulder pads, hammered at a keyboard. As she pivoted, her face remained an indistinct smear, a photograph blurred beyond recognition. Hello. My voice, thin and reedy, seemed to absorb itself into the oppressive stillness. She offered no reply, her attention fixed on the emerald script cascading down a black monitor. Behind me, the elevator chimed its metallic summons. I scrambled back inside, a frantic retreat, the doors sighing shut as my heart hammered a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Floor 12B now glowed on the indicator. The ascent resumed, accompanied this time by a grinding lament, a sound of tortured metal I'd never heard echo in these shafts. My hands trembled, uselessly battering the lobby button. Futile. The display flickered, resolving into 19X. The doors slid open onto our floor, Omnicorp's familiar layout, yet ravaged. Skeletal remains of plants littered the ground amidst drifts of dust. Papers formed chaotic dunes. Chairs lay overturned like fallen soldiers. Through the panoramic windows, where city lights should have glittered, stretched a sky the color of rust, framing skeletal ruins where neighboring towers once stood. The air pressed in, hot, stagnant. A noise slithered from the corridor's depths, a dragging, shuffling gait. I slammed the close door button, the impact stinging my finger. The doors met just as a figure shambled into view, vaguely humanoid, but bent into shapes anatomy never intended. Breath tore through my lungs in ragged bursts. Sweat traced cold paths down my spine. Again, the lift moved. Symbols I couldn't decipher pulsed on the display. The next revelation, our office, but glimpsed through the lens of last week. There I sat, Arthur Finch at his desk, submerged in the late-night glow of the monitor. This other me, oblivious, never looked up as I choked out a greeting. I watched him check his phone. That precise moment, issue a weary sigh, begin the ritual of packing. The night before the migration began. I stepped out, fully into the apparition. "Hey!" I yelled, the sound swallowed by the mundane office hum. My counterpart strode past, heading for the elevators, his shoulder brushing mine. Reality tilted violently. A spike of pure agony lanced through my skull. Nausea surged as I stumbled back into the waiting lift. The other Arthur had vanished. Bloomed on the indicator. The doors revealed a cavernous space unknown to me. Endless rows of monolithic black cabinets, receding into shadow, punctuated by the silent, urgent blink of crimson warning lights. The air vibrated, electric, raising the hairs on my arms. Before my eyes, the server racks began to soften, to melt, dripping like black candles onto the polished floor. I hammered the button, sealing the doors against the technological decay. My phone stubbornly displayed 11:47 p.m. Unchanged. A phantom minute stretched into eternity. I tried calling security. No signal bars graced the screen. It flickered once, twice, then died. Another halt. This time, the doors opened onto the building's main lobby. Submerged. Shoals of fish drifted past the security console. Tendrils of seaweed swayed where ficus trees should have stood. Water lapped at the elevator's threshold, a contained aquarium, refusing to spill inward. In the murky distance, something vast stirred, fins multiplying unnaturally. Floor after impossible floor unfurled. Omnicorp repurposed for global conflict, sandbags piled against windows, stark propaganda posters peeling from the walls. Omnicorp as a rampant conservatory, great trees bursting through ceiling tiles, vines strangling desks. Omnicorp as a sterile crime scene, delineated by yellow tape and numbered evidence markers, eerily devoid of personnel. My watch remained frozen at 11:47 p.m. The phone stayed stubbornly inert. I lost count of the impossible transits. The next stop presented our office, blessedly normal, achingly vacant. On my desk, a coffee cup, steam gently curling from its lip. My jacket draped over the chair back. My monitor displayed an error message, stark white on blue. Timeline divergence detected, attempting to reconcile. Hesitantly, I approached my workspace. The mug was mine, the familiar chip in the handle, a small anchor in this sea of wrongness. The coffee radiated warmth. On screen, the text morphed. Multiple instances detected, initiating emergency protocol. Simultaneously, the building's fire alarm erupted, a piercing shriek that clawed at my nerves. Crimson emergency strobes painted the room in frantic pulses. I spun, lunging for the elevator, but the doors had already sealed themselves. The indicator glowed a malevolent red. Error. My frantic jabs at the call button yielded nothing. From the stairwell door, heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoed. The handle began to rotate. A chime. The elevator doors slid open. I threw myself inside as something immense and shadowed poured into the office. Its movement jerky, unnatural, like frames missing from a film reel. The lift plummeted, a sickening drop far exceeding its normal velocity. The indicator dissolved into a frantic cascade of random numbers, symbols, hieroglyphs. My stomach vaulted into my throat. The cables shrieked their protest. And then, the doors opened. I saw myself, Arthur Finch, weary from the server migration, stepping into this very elevator at 11:47 p.m., poised at the precipice of this nightmare. He hadn't noticed yet. The air thickened in my lungs, Strangling the warning, I tried to scream. He pressed lobby. For a sliver of a second, our eyes met across the impossible divide. His fatigue dissolved into raw, uncomprehending terror. The doors slammed shut. The car convulsed violently, throwing me to my knees. The display became a frantic blur, cycling through every impossible floor, every alien symbol, faster and faster until it was white noise made visible. Then, stillness. The doors opened onto the lobby, the real lobby. The night guard, startled, looked up from his paperback. "Everything all right, Mr. Finch. Could have sworn I heard that lift carrying on." My legs felt like unreliable stilts as I stepped onto solid marble. My watch showed 11:48 p.m. My phone buzzed back to life in my pocket, a sudden influx of delayed messages. "Fine," I croaked, the word rough as gravel. "Everything's fine." The walk through the parking garage was an exercise in forced normalcy, each shadow seeming deeper than it should. Driving home, my rearview mirror became an object of obsessive focus. Back in my apartment building, I shunned the elevator, taking the stairs. The following day, Omnicorp hummed along, oblivious. The server migration. Flawless, apparently. Yet sometimes working late, the distant groan of the elevator machinery snags my attention. That specific, grinding pitch. And sometimes, fleetingly, I catch the floor indicator displaying numbers that have no business existing. I take the stairs now, all 27 flights. For the exercise, I tell curious colleagues. But last week, descending the concrete well, a glance through the stairwell window revealed, just for a heartbeat, that diseased red sky. And now, my phone, consulted late at night, occasionally insists it is 11:47 p.m., defying the actual hour. I'm searching for new employment, something low-rise, something firmly anchored to the ground floor, because I know what stirs at 11:47 p.m. in the high places. I know about the wrong floors, the impossible spaces nested between the real ones, thresholds opening onto vistas of what might be, or what should never be. And I know that somewhere, trapped in the perpetual motion of that aberrant lift, another Arthur Finch is still riding, still pressing buttons, still watching doors open onto madness, desperate to find his way back to the correct strand of time. Sometimes in the deepest hours of the night, I wonder if the Arthur Finch who takes the stairs ever truly escaped at all. Each morning departure involved a ritual, the click of the deadbolt, the verification twist of the knob, the confirming rattle. Elara wasn't prone to baseless anxieties, yet a persistent, visceral unease coiled within her regarding the flat. Upon return, subtle dislocations greeted her. Day 1, an armchair canted strangely from its established position. Day 2, the coffee table, having migrated perhaps an inch, maybe 2. Day 3, a kitchen cabinet yawning slightly ajar, a stark contradiction to her memory of securing it. An indefinable wrongness permeated the space, nurturing the insidious suspicion that her tenancy was somehow shared. This temporary refuge, this furnished box, became hers, while her own home underwent an 8-week surgical renovation. The contractor's timeline necessitated the nearby rental, a compact studio comprising a small sitting area. A galley kitchen barely worthy of the name, a sleeping chamber, and a sliver of a bathroom. Its contents were dictated by the lease: a diminutive sofa, the aforementioned coffee table, a lone armchair, a dining set for two, a bed frame, a wardrobe. Standard issue, seemingly innocuous upon first inspection. The building itself projected modernity: gleaming lobby, staffed front desk, corridors lined with uniform portals. Her unit, number 607, resided near the lift shaft's hum. The initial week passed uneventfully, blurred by the demands of work and the fatigue that followed. Then, a Friday evening unfurled. Sinking into the sofa, television flickering to life, Alara's gaze snagged on the armchair. It occupied an aberrant position, further from the window than she recalled. The cleaner. The thought surfaced, a plausible explanation. Weekly housekeeping was stipulated in the rental agreement. She mentally flagged checking their schedule. Shrugging off the dissonance, she rose, nudged the chair back to its rightful geometry, and willed the incident from her mind. The subsequent morning delivered another minor anomaly. The kitchen cabinet directly above the sink hung partially open. A lapse in her own routine, surely. She clicked it shut, brewed her coffee, and pressed on. Saturday night, returning late, the sight that arrested her just inside the doorway was the coffee table. It hadn't merely shifted. It had advanced, encroaching nearly 2 feet upon the sofa's territory. Her pulse quickened, a leaden weight settling in her gut. Housekeeping had serviced the unit on Tuesday. Today was Saturday. No unscheduled visits authorized. She circled the displaced furniture, peered beneath it. Nothing. Sinking onto the couch, the television's glow offered scant comfort. Her eyes darted between the table and the secured entrance, grappling with the unnerving possibility of unconscious action. Sleep came, but it was a fragile, troubled state. Monday morning found her at the front desk, inquiring with Ms. Albright, the receptionist, about weekend access to her unit. The woman consulted the digital logs. Only your key fob registered, Ms. Vance, she reported crisply, confirming housekeeping adhered to a weekday schedule. A cold current traced Alara's spine. She manufactured a smile, murmured thanks, and ascended to the 6th floor. Inside 607, an initial survey revealed nothing amiss. Then, in the kitchen, retrieving water from the refrigerator, she turned. The bedroom door stood open. She distinctly recalled closing it. Bottle cold against her palm, Alara stared into the vacant chamber. Unmade bed, closed wardrobe, drawn curtains. Nothing else disturbed. Perhaps I didn't close it fully. The rationalization felt thin, failing to quell the rising tide of trepidation in her chest. Later, emerging from the shower's steam, toweling damp hair, an acoustic tremor reached her from the living room. A faint click, reminiscent of electronics engaging. Heart thrumming, shirt half-fastened, she hurried out. The television remained dark, but the standing lamp beside the sofa cast a warm pool of light. A lamp she was certain she'd left off. The pounding in her ears intensified. Windows secured. Front door bolted. A frantic inventory followed. Closet depths probed. The space beneath the sofa examined. Nothing. Illuminating every corner of the flat, she paced, finally collapsing onto the couch, a tremor running through her arms. Her thoughts galloped, a frantic search for logic colliding with the undeniable sense that logic had fled. The second week ushered in a new strategy, a minuscule paper sentinel. Each morning, Ilara meticulously positioned a sliver of paper high in the door jamb, a silent witness designed to fall at any intrusion. One evening, it lay upon the welcome mat. A call to Ms. Albright yielded familiar assurances. No key fob usage logged. The hallway camera, she explained patiently, surveyed only the lift lobby, offering no direct view of Ilara's door. Perhaps it's simply dislodged, Ms. Albright suggested mildly. Plausible, yet Ilara found herself theorizing about alternate ingress, a forgotten service hatch, an improbable connecting door. The flat, though revealing no obvious secrets, felt increasingly claustrophobic. Sleep offered little respite, plagued by visions of unseen movement, the chilling notion of a presence lingering even while she was home. Exhaustion became her unwelcome companion at work. One afternoon, impulse struck. Citing errands, Ilara departed work at midday, arriving back at the building shortly after 12:30. The corridor stretched silent. Pressing her ear to the cool metal of 607, she detected nothing. She turned the key with deliberate slowness, easing the door inward. From the short passage leading towards the bedroom and bath, a distinct groan emanated, the sound of a closing door, hushed but unmistakable. Her throat constricted. She surged down the hallway. The bathroom door hung slightly ajar. Pushing it wide, she flicked on the light. Empty porcelain and tile stared back. The bedroom door, too, stood open. Ilara burst in, gaze sweeping the wardrobe, tugging drawers. Vacancy echoed. A feverish heat bloomed in her temples. No forced entry, yet the sound lingered in her auditory memory. Old hinges, she reasoned desperately, even as the floor seemed to tilt beneath her, the edge of reality blurry. That evening, Ilara returned bearing a small folding chair borrowed from the office. She positioned it in the internal hallway, facing the bathroom, a sentinel in the encroaching darkness. Phone clutched, she waited. Midnight passed, drowsiness weighing heavy. Around 1, a soft, resonant impact sounded from the living area. Furniture disturbed. She snapped awake, launching herself towards the sound, phone beam slicing the dark. Silence greeted her. The sofa stood undisturbed, the table precisely placed, but a lamp glowed again. Her skin prickled with cold awareness. Turning back towards the hallway, she saw it. The bedroom door, previously wide open, was now partially closed. Adrenaline surged, her heart cannonading against her ribs. She thrust the door open, phone light frantically painting the interior. Still empty. Beads of sweat traced paths down her temples. Sleep became an impossibility that night. The third week crawled by under a pall of nervous exhaustion. At work, Ilara found her focus fractured, compulsively reviewing documents, plagued by doubt. An attempt to capture evidence using her phone camera, strategically placed on a shelf, proved futile. The battery invariably expired before yielding anything conclusive. A dedicated security camera was financially out of reach, her resources already strained by the ongoing renovation costs. Thoughts of terminating the lease warred with the practical need for accommodation and a stubborn, almost defiant, desire for resolution. Fleeing felt like surrender, leaving the enigma unsolved, the unseen tormentor victorious. She needed to know, was this phantom real, or a figment of her unraveling mind? One afternoon, waiting for the lift, Ilara heard it distinctly. Movement from within 607. Footfalls, muffled but undeniable. Heart leaping, she fumbled with her key, desperate for stealth, praying to catch whoever trespassed. The lock yielded. She thrust the door inward. Simultaneously, a faint squeak echoed from the bedroom area. Alara sprinted towards the sound. The bedroom door was closed. She seized the handle, wrenching it open. Emptiness mocked her. Wardrobe flung wide, drawers pulled out, the space beneath the bed scrutinized. Nothing. Her hands trembled violently, a physical ache blooming in her chest from the relentless tautness. Returning to the living area, she registered it almost incidentally. The armchair had pivoted again, now facing the sofa directly. Later, she stood before Miss Albright once more, voice tight with strain, detailing the migrating furniture. "Is there any possibility?" Alara pressed. A former occupant retained a key. Ms. Albright's professional calm remained intact. "Impossible, Ms. Vance. Locks are always changed between tenancies. Our logs show no access." The receptionist's unwavering stance left Alara with an acrid sensation. Disbelief, perhaps, or simply helplessness. She retreated, enveloped in a profound sense of isolation. That evening demanded a different approach, irrefutable evidence. Alara meticulously arranged specific items, shoes precisely aligned against the entryway wall, a pen laid perfectly parallel on the television stand, kitchen chairs angled just so. She documented the arrangement with her phone camera. Then she departed, seeking refuge in a nearby bar for 2 hours, nursing a drink she barely tasted. Upon return, she compared the current state with the photographic record. One shoe nudged inches from its mark. The pen lay askew. Coils of dread tightened in her stomach. She swept through the flat again, this time calling out into the stillness. "Whoever you are, I know you're here." Only the echo answered, amplifying the silence. A volatile brew of indignation and dread burned behind her eyes. The 4th week commenced under the weight of profound weariness. Her manager, noting her pallor, insisted she take a day for recuperation. Alara spent it within the confines of 607, refusing to leave, a prisoner in her temporary home. The day remained quiet until late afternoon. Standing at the bathroom sink, door deliberately left ajar, she heard it, a soft, mechanical click, originating near the bedroom. Glancing towards the hallway, she saw the bedroom door swinging gently shut. Water dripping from her hands, she dashed towards it, flung it open, and plunged inside. Empty. Again. The wardrobe stood closed. She approached it slowly, hand hovering over the handle, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. With a sudden motion, she pulled it open. Nothing but hanging clothes and shadows. She meticulously checked behind them, then pulled out the shallow dresser drawers, confirming their impossibility as hiding spots. Sweat slicked her skin. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. She felt utterly ensnared in a perverse game of hide-and-seek with an invisible opponent. The remainder of the day dissolved into restless traversing, ceaseless checks behind doors, under furniture, verifying window locks. Night fell. Alara dragged a dining chair to the bedroom door, wedging its back firmly beneath the handle. She secured the window latch, plugged in her phone, and lay down, courting sleep that felt leagues away. Every creak of the building was magnified, every shadow imbued with menace. Sometime near 3 a.m., oblivion began to claim her, only to be shattered by a dull, resonant impact from beyond the door. She snapped awake, instantly alert, heart hammering painfully. The bedside lamp flared to life, illuminating the chair, still braced tight, the door securely closed. Alara slid from bed, crept to the door, pressed her ear against the wood. Faint, unmistakable footsteps whispered through the living room. Her breath caught, trapped in her throat. A paralyzing dilemma. Open the door and alert the intruder, guaranteeing their escape, or remain barricaded, tormented by their proximity. The stalemate couldn't hold. After moments thick with indecision, she cautiously pulled the chair away and eased the door open. Darkness. Silence. Flipping the main light switch revealed an empty living room, serene but for one detail. The coffee table had migrated once more. A mere inch, yet it screamed violation. A silent scream built within her. This wasn't fatigue. It wasn't imagination. It was untenable. She had to escape. Dawn broke. Ilara was at her own apartment's construction site, imploring the contractor, offering bonuses, desperate for an expedited finish. He promised to accelerate efforts, aiming for completion within the week. Back in 607, she began packing, a determined urgency driving her actions. The final nights were spent under the glare of electric lights, any faint nocturnal sounds deliberately ignored. Investigation felt futile. Escape was the only imperative. On departure morning, wrestling her suitcases towards the exit, she paused for a final, sweeping glance. The armchair listed towards the wall. A kitchen cabinet hung slightly open. With a quiet click, she closed the cabinet, turned, and walked out, consciously avoiding a backward glance. The identity of her unseen flatmate remained elusive, a question mark hanging perpetually over those weeks. Was there some cleverly concealed alcove, a copied key circulating unknown, or had profound exhaustion simply frayed her perceptions? She never knew. She fled that building and its suffocating secrets, burying the experience when she finally reclaimed her renovated home. Yet, the phantom gaze lingers sometimes. She finds herself verifying locks with meticulous care, startled by the innocuous groans of settling timbers. The memory of 607 persists, a chilling whisper suggesting someone moved through those rooms alongside her, always just beyond the veil of sight. The thought still sends a cold prickle across her skin. A haunting echo she prays remains confined to the past. The luminescence of my monitor painted the deserted office in spectral hues, deepening the shadows pooling around vacant workstations. As the final email dispatched into the digital ether, a fragile sense of completion settled over me. Freedom, finally. Home. And then, the sound. Incontrovertible, unmistakable. The chime of the elevator arriving on our floor. Ice water seemed to replace the blood in my veins. I was, definitively, supposed to be the sole occupant this high up. My name is Ilara Vance. I'm 28, a marketing strategist for Apex Solutions, and I'd been wrestling silicon and strategy deep into the night, polishing a vital pitch for a new acquisition. Solitary late nights were hardly novel, yet this particular darkness felt different. The profound quiet of the skyscraper, moments before a sanctuary, now pressed in, amplifying the elevator's soft arrival into a thunderclap. A glance at my watch confirmed the absurdity. 11:47 p.m. The custodial team had vanished hours prior. Security patrols were strictly hourly affairs. No legitimate reason existed for anyone ascending now. For a fleeting second, I contemplated calling out a tentative hello. But a deeper, more ancient impulse, a primal whisper from the brain's oldest corners, screamed for silence, for concealment. Rising with excruciating slowness, coaxing my chair not to betray me with a groan, the open plan layout suddenly felt like a stage under a hostile spotlight. I needed shadow, a better angle. Soundlessly, I navigated towards the break room. Its unlit interior offered refuge and a direct line of sight to the elevator bank. I tucked myself behind the doorframe, peering through the narrow gap. With a gentle pneumatic sigh, the elevator doors slid apart. I held my breath captive, anticipating the emergence of a colleague, security, anyone explicable. But the illuminated car remained starkly vacant, a bright, empty rectangle carved into the dim corridor wall. A frown creased my brow, an accidental button push perhaps. Yet the doors hung open, refusing the cycle of closure. As I watched, perplexed, the lights within the elevator cab flickered, once, twice, before extinguishing utterly, plunging the interior into a profound darkness, a gaping maw in the plasterboard. A tremor traced its path down my spine. This was fundamentally wrong. Logic dictated retreat, the stairwell, the long descent, the street. But curiosity, that insidious, often fatal human flaw, anchored me to the spot. From the Stygian depths of the elevator, a figure emerged. The ambient office gloom rendered it a mere silhouette, yet its stature was immediately unsettling. Impossibly tall, its cranium grazing the ceiling frame. Its proportions felt nightmarishly skewed, arms like pendulums, dangling far below where knees ought to be. The shape paused, motionless for a beat, as if calibrating itself to the new space. Then, with a sinuous movement that churned my stomach, its head rotated. No features were visible, yet an illogical, bone-deep certainty flooded me. It was looking directly at my hiding place. I recoiled, flattening myself against the cool wall, my heart hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs, convinced its frantic rhythm was audible across the distance. Shutting my eyes tight, I prayed with silent desperation for this to dissolve, to be a mirage born of caffeine and exhaustion. When I dared to look again, the hallway was empty. Relief, sharp and intoxicating, lasted only a microsecond before a far more terrifying possibility bloomed. If it wasn't there, where had it gone? As if summoned by the thought, a sound drifted from the main office expanse. Footfalls, yet unlike any human tread I knew. Too light, unnervingly rapid, possessing a velocity that seemed physically impossible for a being of its apparent size. Escape. Now. My eyes darted to the stairwell access door, perhaps 30 feet distant, across rows of shadowed desks. A desperate sprint might work, but the rational fragment of my mind, not yet consumed by raw terror, screamed that flight meant noise. It would hear. So I moved, painstakingly, each footfall measured, silent as falling dust. Halfway across the open space, the alien footsteps ceased. The ensuing silence was vast, suffocating. I froze, terrified that the mere act of drawing breath would betray my location. And then I heard it. A soft, sibilant intake of air. Close. Far too close. I turned my head, an agonizingly slow pivot, millimeter by millimeter, and saw it. It stood at the terminus of the desk row, scarcely 10 feet away. Caught in the ghostly afterglow of a forgotten monitor, I could finally perceive its face, or, more accurately, the utter absence of one. Its head was a smooth, ovoid shape composed of condensed shadow. But as I watched, paralyzed by horror, the surface began to ripple, to shift. Eyes opened, not two, but dozens, blinking out of sync like disturbed constellations. A mouth tore itself open across the lower expanse, stretching to an impossible width, revealing rows of needle-sharp, glistening teeth. Ilara, it intoned, the sound a composite horror, like 1,000 sibilant whispers woven together. We've been waiting for you. I ran. All pretense of stealth evaporated in a surge of pure adrenaline. I launched myself towards the stairwell door, the sound of tearing fabric and impossibly swift footsteps erupting behind me. I slammed into the heavy door, stumbling, nearly pitching headlong down the concrete steps. I took them in frantic bounds, 3 at a time, the echo of my pursuer reverberating unnervingly close in the enclosed shaft. 27 floors, an eternity compressed into minutes. My lungs burned, my legs screamed in protest, but terror was a merciless engine. Always just behind, I could hear it gaining. I burst through the stairwell door into the lobby, colliding almost bodily with the startled night security guard. "Call the police," I shrieked, momentum carrying me towards the main glass doors without pause. I heard the guard yell something indistinct, but didn't register the words. I fled out into the street, the cool night air a shocking slap against my overheated skin. Only after sprinting several blocks did I risk a backward glance. The street lay empty behind me. No sign of the thing from the elevator. I staggered to a halt, lungs heaving, mind a chaotic storm. What had happened? What was that entity? As my breathing began to steady, insidious doubt slithered in. Had I conjured it all? Some elaborate stress-induced phantasm? My gaze lifted to the imposing structure of the Apex Solutions building, its upper reaches swallowed by the night sky. As I watched, lights began to activate, floor by floor, a steady progression ascending from the lobby, the security guard checking things out. Sensible. Then precisely as the light reached the 27th floor, my floor, every single light in the building winked out. Total darkness. For a long, suspended moment, nothing. Then, one by one, floor by floor, the lights began to reignite. But this time, they started from the top. I watched, transfixed by a fresh wave of horror, as the illumination descended like a malevolent countdown. 26th floor, 25th, 24th. Whatever resided up there was methodically working its way down. A car horn blared nearby, shattering my trance. I turned and ran again, directionless, propelled only by the imperative to put distance between myself and that building. As I fled, my phone vibrated violently in my pocket. With trembling fingers, I retrieved it. A text message glowed on the screen. Sender unknown. See you tomorrow, Ilara. Don't be late. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp. How could it possess my number? Yet I knew, with a certainty that settled like lead in my gut, that I would return tomorrow, because whatever that thing was, it had claimed my workplace. And if I failed to appear, it might very well come searching. I ran through the sleeping city, questions spiraling without answers. What was that creature? Its purpose? its desire. The most terrifying query: what did it want with me? One truth resonated with chilling clarity. My existence had irrevocably fractured. The comfortable, predictable reality I inhabited had been revealed as a thin veneer, beneath which monsters nested in elevators and shadows bore teeth. Finally reaching the sanctuary of my apartment building, fumbling with keys, a new, chilling thought surfaced. If this entity could infiltrate my office tower, could it manifest anywhere? Was any space truly secure? I bolted my door, checked the lock twice, then slid down against the cool wood, collapsing onto the floor. Sleep was an impossibility. All that remained was to endure the hours until dawn, and with it, the unavoidable return journey. Deep in my bones, I knew this was merely the overture. Whatever game this being played, I was now, irrevocably, a pawn. As the first tentative fingers of morning light probed through my blinds, I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Somewhere, lurking in the interstitial darkness between floors, something waited. And tomorrow, prepared or not, I would have to face it once more. Hours had bled together under the monotonous drone of tires on tarmac, the interstate a ribbon of darkness unfurling since sunset. 2 states dissolved behind me, swallowed by the rearview mirror. My body hummed with fatigue, demanding respite, a simple pause to unkink spine and soul. Not the glaring fluorescence of a gas station, nor the anonymous bustle of a major rest stop. Solitude beckoned. A modest sign emerged from the gloom. Scenic overlook, 1 mile. Promising quietude. It would suffice. Emptiness greeted me. A scattering of sodium lamps pooled weak, jaundiced light onto asphalt scarred with vacant parking lines. Legions of them stretching into obscurity. Shadows clung thick and deep beyond these frail circles of illumination. I maneuvered the car beneath one sputtering lamp, craving its meager glow, and killed the engine. Silence rushed in. Stepping out, the air bit, cold and damp against my skin. I stretched, arms reaching for the indifferent stars, vertebrae cracking a small, sharp report in the stillness. Barely a minute passed. Then, perception snagged on a shape standing just where the lamplight frayed into blackness. A figure, cloaked or hooded, utterly still, watching me. Details remained elusive, swallowed by the cowl, save for the glint of eyes. Small, dark points fixed on mine, unblinking. Everything all right. My voice, louder than intended, strained for normalcy. No reply, no shift in posture, only that unwavering stare drilling into me from the edge of visibility. A current of unease traced its path up my spine. Lost, perhaps, waiting for a ride. Rational thoughts felt thin, unconvincing against the weight of her profound stillness. Hesitantly, I edged forward. Maybe proximity would coax a response, but my advance triggered an equal retreat. She simply melted backward into the waiting party dark, instantly absorbed. Gone. I stood rooted, a debate raging internally. Investigate or retreat? A primal instinct screamed caution. This place, this encounter, felt dissonant, fundamentally wrong. Minutes stretched taut. Enough. Time to leave. My hand reached for the cold metal of the door handle. That's when the sound breathed through the silence, thin as thread. Help me. I froze, fingers suspended inches from the handle. The plea, barely corporeal, had originated from the shadows that had consumed her. Turning, I strained my eyes against the oppressive blackness. Nothing. Just the void yawning beyond the lamp's reach. Hello. The word felt clumsy, echoing unnaturally. Are you hurt? Only the low thrum of the failing lights answered. Indecision warred within me, the undeniable pull of that faint, desperate sound against the rising tide of dread. One step toward the darkness, then another. Is there something I can do? My voice was a hushed thing now, swallowed almost before it left my lips. Suddenly, she was there again, materialized without a whisper of movement, standing mere feet away, back within the light's feeble embrace. Her face, now visible, was a canvas of pallor, skin like old parchment stretched taut over bone. Eyes sunk deep in their sockets, dark pools reflecting the sickly light, fixed on me with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. Help me. She breathed again, the sound fragile, almost infantile. A reflexive step back. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Are you lost? Can I call someone for you? Silence stretched, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing. Her stare never wavered, lips parted slightly, eyes wide, devoid of any discernible emotion save that terrible, vacant intensity. The damp chill on my skin turned icy. My hands began to tremble. She seemed fragile, yet an undeniable wrongness emanated from her, a silent alarm shrieking in my mind. I have a phone, I offered, voice betraying my tremor. Is there a number? Her gaze flickered, a micro-expression I couldn't decipher, before a slow, almost mechanical shake of her head. But her eyes, they never left mine. Can you take me? The whisper was so faint, it brushed against my hearing like a moth's wing. Take you? Where? The question emerged tight, strangled. No answer came. Instead, a hand lifted, reaching toward me. Fingers, pale and skeletal, trembled slightly in the air between us. Instinct recoiled. Another step back, my heart a frantic drum against my sternum. Every nerve ending screamed, "Run!" But I was transfixed, caught in the tractor beam of her gaze. She advanced a step, hand still outstretched, eyes boring into mine. A cold sweat beaded on my neck. My muscles locked, trapped between flight and a paralyzing fascination. Her stare deepened, felt like it pierced flesh and bone, probing secrets I hadn't known I possessed. Then, abruptly, the tension snapped. Her hand fell limp to her side. Her gaze dropped to the ground. Shoulders slumped infinitesimally. She took one step back, then another, dissolving once more into the impenetrable shadows. Silence reclaimed the space. I stood gasping, heart slamming against my ribs, trying to process the sheer strangeness of it. Who was she? What did she want? The questions hammered uselessly against the overwhelming imperative. Leave. Now. I spun toward the car, hand shaking violently as it fumbled for the door. Just as my fingers closed around a handle, a touch landed on my shoulder. Icy, damp, impossibly real. My breath hitched. My heart seized. "Don't leave," rasped a voice directly behind me, close enough to feel the phantom chill of breath on my neck. Whipping around, propelled by pure adrenaline, I found nothing. Only the deserted tarmac, the sickly pools of light, and the vast, consuming shadows stretching into the endless night. No hesitation remained. I lunged into the driver's seat, slammed the door, the click of the lock echoing unnaturally loud. Keys scraped, engine roared to life. Hands slick with sweat gripped the wheel. My eyes darted frantically across the empty lot, scanning the darkness, finding only emptiness. She was gone. Utterly. I threw the car into gear, tires squealing on the pavement as I fled the overlook, eyes locked forward, refusing the urge to glance back. Miles devoured the highway before the trembling subsided, enough for me to pull into the harsh, bright safety of a chain gas station. Under the buzz of fluorescent lights, the encounter replayed, sharp and terrifying. I didn't know what I had encountered in that lonely darkness, what spectral need or ancient hunger resided there. I knew only one thing with absolute certainty, that overlook, shrouded in its quiet dread, would remain forever unvisited in my future travels. Never did I imagine unease coiling around the side of an ordinary looking glass, but the one Elias carried home from the dusty antique emporium was altogether different. Encased in a ponderous gilded frame chased with Baroque swirls, it possessed a heft that defied its appearance. The proprietor, a man of few words and fewer glances, had merely swaddled it in brown paper, pocketed the currency, and averted his gaze. Elias had dismissed the oddness, picturing only a striking acquisition for his sitting room wall. A fool's errand, he now knew. He should have pivoted and fled the threshold of that shop. He wrestled the mirror indoors around the meridian hour. Sunlight streamed through the entryway, and Elias recalled noting the peculiar way the glass drank the light, refracting it with an almost oily quality. It felt unnervingly warm beneath his fingertips. Propping it against the wall flanking the front door, intending only a brief assessment before installation, he stepped back. A glance at his reflected self brought the first tremor of discord. His tousled hair, his familiar features, all present, yet staining the shoulder of his shirt in the glass. A smudge of perfect darkness bloomed. Elias checked his actual garment. The cotton was immaculate. A beat of stillness. He looked up again. The phantom stain had vanished. Just a trick of the light, perhaps, or a smear upon the aged silvering. Retrieving cleanser from the kitchen, he buffed the surface until it shone with flawless clarity. Through the languid afternoon, Elias found his path repeatedly crossing the mirror's gaze, his reflections captured fleetingly. A subtle, almost imperceptible judder clung to the edges, his mirrored movements trailing reality by a hair's breadth. He frowned, attributing it to fatigue born of long workdays. Deciding its permanent home would be the sitting room, positioned above a diminutive table near the window, he commenced the labor of hanging it. The task required exertion. Spirit level consulted. A sturdy nail hammered true. The mirror cautiously elevated. Stepping back to the room's center to appraise its alignment, his eyes swept across the reflected panorama behind him. The settee correctly placed, the drapes swept aside, the standing lamp occupying its usual corner. And then, the anomaly. A door, reflected behind him. The portal to his subterranean storage space. In the tangible world, that door stood firmly shut. The mirror, however, depicted it slightly ajar, a sliver of profound darkness yawning within. Elias spun around, heart quickening. The physical door was closed, secure. Returning his gaze to the mirror, the reflection now concurred, mirroring reality faithfully. A frisson of anxiety traced his spine, his arms trembling faintly. He rationalized it. A trick of perspective, the handle catching the light strangely. He fought to quell the rising disquiet. Sleep proved elusive that night. Phantom creaks whispered through the house, the familiar groans of settling timbers now imbued with ambiguous menace. Around midnight, thirst drove him kitchenward for water. Yet, an invisible current pulled him towards the sitting room. He flicked on the lamp, its weak glow casting his elongated shadow onto the wall where the mirror hung. It waited, impassive. He drew nearer, leaning in until his own face swam into view. Eyes bloodshot from wakefulness, yes, but no aberrant marks, no temporal shivers in the glass. A wave of foolishness washed over him. Just as he began to turn away, a sound emanated from the mirror. A delicate tapping, faint, rhythmic, like fingernails on glass. His pulse leaped. He recoiled, scanning the surface for a crack, an insect trapped behind the pane. Nothing. The glass remained smooth, unbroken. His fingers traced the ornate gold frame, his own frantic heartbeat drumming against his skin. Silence descended once more. He lingered, breathing raggedly, before retreating to bed, sleep now a distant shore. The following day bled into exhaustion at his modest office job, a place demanding focus on ledgers and data. His concentration fractured, his gaze drifting constantly to the clock, anticipating the return home with a knot of dread. He confided in Marcus, a colleague, about the peculiar mirror. Marcus chuckled, dismissing it as the charming imperfections of antiquity, jesting about haunted dwellings. Elias forced a reciprocal laugh, a hollow sound against the tension tightening his chest. It was the slippage in the reflection, the phantom stain, the errant door that gnawed at him. He wrestled his attention back to spreadsheets. Returning home that evening, Elias paused at the sitting room's entrance, observing the mirror from afar. It reflected the room faithfully. Hallway, basement door, closed. Furniture, open curtains, all precisely as they were. A measure of relief eased through him. He prepared a solitary meal, consumed it before the flickering television, then sought the cleansing ritual of a shower. Afterward, padding back into the sitting room to extinguish the lamp, he froze. The mirror offered a different scene. It displayed him, Elias, moving about the kitchen, seemingly engaged in culinary tasks, stirring a pot on the stove, glancing towards the cupboards. Yet, he stood here, before the mirror itself. His present self was visible. Within, the reflection's background, clad in the same damp towel and shorts. But the primary figure in the glass was elsewhere, performing actions already past. The vision endured but a second before snapping violently back to a mundane reflection of him standing by the lamp. He staggered back, colliding with the settee, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He tried to voice his shock, but his throat was parched, constricted. He could only stare, transfixed, anticipating the next rupture in reality. Sweat beaded on his brow. After a protracted moment of paralysis, he fumbled for his phone, the urge to summon Marcus, to find validation, warring with the certainty of ridicule. He lowered the device, compelled instead to approach the mirror again. He pressed his palm flat against the cool, unyielding glass. His reflected hand met his own, faint and precise. No immediate strangeness. Exhaling a shuddering breath, he switched off the lamp and fled to his bedroom, leaving the mirror to its silent vigil in the dark. Sleep oblivion were all he craved. That night, a soft, rhythmic thudding roused him from a shallow doze. Faint but persistent, like footfalls ascending a staircase. It emanated, he realized with dawning horror, from the sitting room. His heart resumed its panicked rhythm, his mouth instantly dry. Slipping from bed, he activated the hallway light, pausing just outside his bedroom door, listening intently. The thudding persisted. Goose flesh prickled his skin as he crept towards the sitting room. Reaching the threshold, he saw it. The basement door stood wide open. He never left it open. Its warped frame required a deliberate tug. Now, it gaped, revealing the Stygian descent to the storage below. His gaze instinctively flickered to the mirror. Its reflection offered a chilling counterpoint. It showed him, Elias, standing in the same spot, but his mirrored counterpart was turned, facing the reflected basement door. Even as he watched, paralyzed, the Elias in the glass stepped across the reflected threshold, descending into the mirrored basement, while the real Elias remained rooted in the sitting room. Fear, a physical restraint. Nausea churned within him. A glacial coldness crept up his arms. He yearned to slam the basement door shut, yet hesitated, terrified to move closer to the mirror's influence. This is absurd, his rational mind insisted. It's merely glass and silver. But every sinew screamed otherwise. Forcing leaden feet forward, he watched his reflection from the corner of his eye. It now seemed tethered to him, matching his hesitant advance. Reaching the gaping doorway, he grasped the handle and pulled the heavy door closed. His reflection mimicked the action precisely. The latch clicked, a small, definitive sound in the charged silence. He swiped sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. Closing the door brought scant comfort. A palpable sense of presence lingered behind the wood, listening, waiting. He risked another glance at the mirror. It showed him before the closed basement door, accurate for a fleeting instant. Then, movement flickered in the reflection's periphery, a nebulous shape sliding across the reflected hallway floor. No corresponding sound reached his ears. He whirled around. The physical hallway was empty, silent. When he looked back, the shape in the mirror was gone. Revulsion and terror warred within him, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps, his pulse thundering in his ears. He scrambled back to his bedroom, locking the door behind him. Perched on the edge of his mattress, Elias fought to regulate his breathing, his fingers quivering uncontrollably. He strained his ears, listening for any further disturbance. Only the profound quiet of the house answered. Hours passed in vigilant wakefulness, his gaze fixed on the locked door. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, dragging him into a fitful, unrestful state. Dawn arrived not as a relief, but as a grim imperative. The mirror had to go. He dressed with determined haste, marching into the sitting room, resolve hardening his features. He would wrench it from the wall, banish it to the garage, out of sight, out of his life. Yet, standing before it, his hand faltered inches from the ornate frame. An palpable cold radiated from the glass, not the ambient chill of the room, but something deeper, more invasive. His stomach clenched, fresh sweat prickled his skin. He retreated, defeated, frustration curdling within him. In the kitchen, clutching a mug of coffee he couldn't drink, he stared towards the sitting room entrance, a tightness constricting his chest. An hour crawled by before courage returned. He located the antique shop's number, dialing with trembling fingers, hoping for answers, for history, for anything. The line rang, unanswered. He tried again. Silence. A profound sense of helplessness washed over him. He paced the kitchen floor, his eyes drawn unwillingly, repeatedly, to the sitting room doorway, to the silent sentinel within. He feared what new horrors might manifest if he stared too long, yet its presence was a weight, an expectation. Steeling himself, he approached the mirror one final time. He studied his reflection, pale, haunted, clad in the day's attire. Reaching out with both hands, he made contact. The surface remained cool, impassive. He could see the strain in his reflected arms, feel the dull ache behind his eyes from sleeplessness. He attempted to lift the mirror from its hook. It refused to yield, feeling impossibly heavier than before, anchored by some unseen force. He strained, muscles protesting, but the frame remained stubbornly affixed. Fetching a screwdriver, intending to pry it loose, he slid the tool's tip behind the gilded edge. Instantly, a loud, grating scratch erupted from the mirror's depths. Startling him so violently, he dropped the screwdriver with a clatter. His heart leaped into his throat. Retrieving the tool, he backed away, shaking. Then, the tapping returned. Soft, insistent rapping against the glass, as if from the other side, seeking entry, seeking attention. His gaze locked onto his reflection. He watched, horrified, as its lips began to move, forming silent words. It seemed to be pleading, calling out, but no sound escaped the glass. The real Elias stood mute, paralyzed. Nausea surged. He stumbled back another step, but the reflection remained pressed close to the surface, its mouth shaping unheard syllables. A high-pitched ringing filled his ears. His breathing grew shallow, his heart hammering against his ribs with painful intensity. Escape. The front door lay behind him. He bolted, grabbing his coat, fumbling with his shoes, his gaze never fully leaving the mirror. The reflection now showed the hallway behind him, but in its reality, the front door remained shut, even as Elias flung the real one wide. This final, jarring mismatch sent a fresh wave of revulsion through him. As he stumbled onto the porch, he caught one last glimpse. His reflection, walking away into the mirrored house, wore a faint, chillingly satisfied smile. He slammed the door shut, leaning against the frame, gulping the crisp, cold air. Relief, potent and immediate, flooded him simply being outside, separated from any... He knew, with absolute certainty, he had to remove the mirror. How remained terrifyingly unclear, but its continued presence was intolerable. His hands still trembled. Sweat slicked his back despite the chill. Smashing it? Disposing of it? Seeking esoteric help? His mind raced through frantic, inadequate options. He stood there on the porch until the shaking subsided enough to permit movement. He walked to his car, drove aimlessly, the streets blurring past, trying to impose order on his fractured thoughts. He passed another antique store, considered stopping, asking, but the fear of sounding unhinged held him back. He just drove, directionless, until the inescapable truth settled. Avoidance was not a solution. There is no final strategy yet. Elias stands outside his own home, this narrative hastily typed onto his phone's screen, a desperate anchor against the encroaching madness. From the curb, He can see the sitting room window. The curtains hang partially open. Behind them, behind the familiar wall, the mirror waits. Thoughts of hammers and heavy sheets flicker through his mind, yet a profound intuition warns him it won't be so easily vanquished. He cannot remain exiled forever. To leave it there is to invite further incursions, to risk seeing his reality irrevocably usurped by the thing behind the glass. He must return. He must confront it. He doesn't know what awaits, what will happen when he crosses that threshold again. But the alternative, letting the mirror slowly consume his life, perhaps trapping him within its cold embrace for eternity, is unthinkable. His heart pounds a frantic rhythm against his ribs, but he is turning back towards the door. He must act before the reflection claims him entirely. My flat, once a sanctuary of light amplified by strategically placed glass, had begun to breathe a disquiet I couldn't name. A constellation of mirrors, some grand floor-standing monoliths framed in dark wood, others sleek wall-mounted slivers of silver, populated the apartment. Initially, they were instruments of spatial illusion, coaxing sunlight into shadowed corners, doubling the perceived dimensions of my modest 10th floor dwelling. I had courted their reflections, celebrated the bright openness they conferred. But one evening, cradling my phone, a glance into the nearest pane sent a jolt through me fierce enough to nearly make me drop it. Beside my own familiar image, another had shimmered into existence. A fleeting presence, there and gone in seconds. I remained motionless, staring into the vacant glass, the frantic thrum of my pulse echoing in my throat. Logic insisted it was fatigue, a trick of the light, yet my skin crawled and a knot tightened deep in my chest. The certainty that I had glimpsed someone else lingered cold and unwelcome. My name is Elias Thorne. 32 years orbiting the sun, mostly tethered to this one-bedroom perch high above the city hum. A freelance digital artist, my existence is largely contained within these walls, a quiet rhythm of deadlines and solitude. The apartment, meticulously ordered save for the lingering ghosts of unpacked cartons residing in one corner, is my shell. The main living space, a Spartan arrangement of sofa and screen, flanked by those ever-present looking glasses. Once sources of aesthetic pleasure, they now felt like unblinking eyes. It was during a nocturnal pilgrimage to the kitchen for water, the apartment steeped in low luminescence, that the first fissure appeared in reality. Within the vast plane of glass dominating the wall behind the sofa, my own form drifted, and beside it, impossibly, swam another. A phantom twin, an overexposed negative of myself, its features blurred save for eyes that held an unnatural, obsidian gleam. A heartbeat, two, then it dissolved like smoke. A cold fist clenched in my gut. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my temples. I advanced, a tremor in my hand as I touched the cool frame. My heart's frantic beat resonated in my ears. Minutes stretched as I scanned every inch of the reflective surface. Nothing. Only my own visage stared back. Weary eyes, sleep-tousled hair, a map of worry etched onto my features. I flicked the overhead light on, flooding the room. Still just me. Alone. A sudden violent urge to tear the mirror from its moorings seized me, warring with a sense of profound absurdity. Shadows, I told myself. Exhaustion playing tricks. extinguished the light, rubbed my temples, and retreated to bed, the tension coiling in my muscles. Morning brought no relief, only a bone-deep weariness. The memory of the spectral reflection clung persistently. I conducted a thorough examination of the mirror. The heavy frame was secure, the glass flawless. Windows remained sealed against any stray breeze that might warp the image. In the clarity of daylight, it was utterly mundane. I circled it, shifted my position, peered from oblique angles, seeing only the expected, solitary reflection. I even pressed my palm flat against the surface, half expecting some textural anomaly. It remained cool, smooth, impassive. Work beckoned. A looming deadline for a client's digital imagery demanded focus. Yet, concentration proved elusive. My fingers stumbled on the keyboard. My gaze kept drifting left, snagging on the small mirrored panel affixed near my desk. Previously unnoticed, it now pulsed with latent menace. Peripheral glances became compulsive, anticipating a reappearance. Hours crawled by uneventfully. By the time the project was dispatched, a sliver of doubt had crept in. Perhaps it had been nothing more than a waking dream, a vivid hallucination born of stress. That evening, performing the ritual of brushing my teeth before the mirror mounted on my closet door, it happened again. I spat, rinsed, and looked up. For one heart-stopping instant, it stood directly behind my left shoulder. Fainter this time, yet unmistakable, the dark luminescence in its eyes fixing me. My mouth went dry, my hand spasmed, toothbrush clattering into the basin. I spun around. Emptiness greeted me. Slowly, muscles rigid from nape to spine, I turned back. The reflection was mine alone once more, but my chest heaved, breath catching in my throat. I stood there for what felt like an age, holding my breath, flicking the light switch on and off, scrutinizing every angle. Nothing more. In the ensuing days, the sightings multiplied, migrating from one reflective surface to another. Ephemeral at first, caught in the corner of my eye, then growing bolder, appearing front and center. Each visitation seemed to bring it marginally closer, its form sharpening, solidifying. I glimpsed it in the bathroom mirror while washing my hands, in the narrow glass by the entryway, as I reached for my jacket. The eyes were the most disturbing element. My eyes, yet possessed by a predatory flicker, reminiscent of nocturnal animals, but imbued with a chilling hostility that seemed directed solely at me. A leaden weight settled in my stomach with each encounter. My throat constricted, often punctuated by a muttered curse. Driven by a mounting dread, I began shrouding the larger mirrors in old bed linens, clumsy attempts to blind the multiplying eyes. The act felt absurd, a descent into paranoia, yet the relief was palpable, if fleeting. When Leo, a friend whose voice usually anchored me, called, the words caught in my throat. How to articulate this haunting that my own reflections were breeding? I mumbled excuses about workload and feeling unwell, deflecting his offer to visit, sealing myself further within my mirrored prison. Avoidance became my strategy. I navigated the apartment with averted eyes, bathing rooms in perpetual electric glare. Sleep offered little respite. A bedside lamp cast long shadows, and peripheral flickers in the darkened television screen or the closet door mirror jolted me awake, heart pounding, skin slit with cold sweat. The sensation of being observed became a constant pressure behind my eyes, a prickling awareness on my skin. Late one night, cocooned on the sofa, seeking oblivion in the flickering inanity of late-night television, a tremor of wrongness prickled the back of my neck. Across the room, nestled behind the silent TV, hung a narrow vertical mirror. I'd forgotten to cover that one. I felt, rather than saw, the shift within its depths. A stillness descended. I muted the sound, the silence amplifying my own ragged breath. Slowly, I turned my head. My reflection gazed back, profile sharp against the dim room. But beside it, facing me directly, stood the other. Its duplicate features were mine, yet subtly warped. The eyes narrowed, obsidian dark. Then, it moved. While I remained frozen, paralyzed, its reflected form detached itself from my stillness, taking a deliberate, gliding step towards the surface of the glass. A strangled gasp tore from my throat. I scrambled backward, tumbling from the sofa in a tangle of limbs, the remote skittering across the floor. When I dared to look again, the mirror held only my own panicked image, sprawled and gasping, sweat cooling rapidly on my face. Sleep was an impossibility. I retreated to a corner, bathing the room in harsh light, a prisoner besieged by phantom reflections. The urge to flee warred with a profound, isolating shame. Who would believe such a tale? Mirrors reflect, they do not create. The thoughts circled endlessly, a counterpoint to the visceral terror tightening my chest. Dawn found me cramped and unrested on the sofa. The day unfolded under a pall of hypervigilance. Every reflective glint was a potential ambush. My shoulders felt permanently knotted, my throat dry. I performed a circuit of the apartment, verifying locks on doors and windows. A futile gesture against an internal siege. All secure. The breach was not in the walls, but in the glass. Later, seeking the cold comfort of water on my face in the bathroom, I leaned over the basin. As I straightened, splashing away the remnants of sleep and anxiety, it materialized. Right there, intimately close behind my left shoulder in the mirror's bright field. Its eyes, twin pools of darkness, locked onto mine. Its mouth, a grim facsimile of my own, was a tight line. We stood frozen in that reflected tableau. Then, its mirrored arm lifted. Simultaneously, a whisper-light, impossibly cold touch grazed my actual shoulder. A raw cry escaped me as I spun, colliding with the vanity, the porcelain biting into my hip. Empty air. Only the frantic drumming of my own heart filled the small space. I slammed the door shut, leaning against it, breath coming in ragged bursts. Enough. This passive terror had to end. Retrieving a screwdriver from the forgotten toolbox near the entrance, I attacked the bedroom closet mirror. Nails shrieked in protest, wood splintered, but the panel finally yielded. I hauled it, heavy and accusatory, into the living room, propping it against a wall. My hands trembled violently. One by one, I began dismantling the smaller mirrors, stacking them in the hallway like captured enemies. The physical exertion a strange counterpoint to the mental strain. Yet, a chilling certainty persisted. This wouldn't suffice. The entity manifested in surfaces I couldn't remove. The obsidian screen of the television, the windows reflecting the night. Glancing at the clock, 7 p.m. I felt the encroaching darkness like a physical weight. I switched on every light, banishing shadows, creating a stark, overlit stage. 9 o'clock. Pacing the narrow corridor, debating the fate of the stacked glass, smash them, or banish them to storage. My gaze snagged on the shrouded monolith in the living room. The sheet covering it rippled, a distinct undulation from beneath. My breath hitched. I froze, eyes locked on the fabric, praying it was a trick of the air. It happened again. A definite pressure, the ghost of a hand pressing outward. Adrenaline surged, hot and metallic. Screwdriver clutched tight, I advanced. Close enough now to see the subtle bulge straining the cloth. Palms slick, pulse deafening. With a sharp, decisive tug, I ripped the sheet away. For a nanosecond, the mirror showed only my own reflection. Pale, wide-eyed, weaponized. Then blooming into existence beside me, impossibly close, stood the figure. Shoulder to virtual shoulder. Its gaze met mine in the glass, lips slightly parted, as if in silent greeting. A primal scream built in my chest. With a guttural cry, I lunged, bringing the screwdriver down hard. The mirror exploded in a starburst of cracks, the sound deafening in the sudden silence. Shards rained down, my reflection and its horrifying companion fractured into 1,000 distorted pieces. I staggered back, chest heaving, the screwdriver falling from numb fingers. The apartment seemed to hold its breath. After minutes that stretched into eternity, punctuated only by my ragged breathing, I retrieved a broom. Sweeping the glittering debris felt surreal. Each glance into the remaining mirrors fraught with tension. No phantom appeared. Exhaustion warred with a vibrating hyper-alertness. Hours have passed. I remain here, amidst the stacked glass and the glittering ruin of the largest mirror, now leaning face down against the wall. A tremor persists in my hands. A dull ache pulses behind my eyes. Did I banish it, or merely shatter its current vessel? The feeling of being watched lingers, a cold pressure between my shoulder blades. Is it nerves, or is it still here, waiting in the periphery, in the gleam of a window pane, the dark surface of my phone? Leaving feels imperative, yet the thought of stepping outside this besieged space is paralyzing. Perhaps I will gather the remaining mirrors, carry them down to the unforgiving concrete of the alley. Perhaps I will simply flee. For now, I avoid all reflections, terrified that the next time I look, the face staring back will no longer be recognizably mine, its phantom twin having finally, irrevocably, crossed over. The building lobby exhaled quietude when I entered, the late afternoon sun slanting through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stillness. It was a place largely deserted, holding its breath. My purpose was simple: retrieve a document from an upper floor, an errand I wished done swiftly, weighed down as I was by the day's fatigue. Nothing occupied my thoughts beyond the task. The elevator doors parted with a soft sigh, revealing an empty compartment. I stepped inside, the scent of polished metal and stale air faint around me. My finger found the button for my destination. The doors slid shut, sealing me in. A low hum resonated through the floor as the ascent began, smooth and unremarkable. Barely moments had passed when the elevator, contrary to my command, decelerated, halting prematurely. The doors whispered open onto a vacant corridor. My eyes scanned the length of it. No lurking figures, no cast shadows, not even the scuff of a distant shoe. Silence pressed in. I listened intently for approaching footsteps or any sign of life. Nothing. Perhaps a phantom summons, I reasoned. Someone who jabbed the button then changed their mind. I leaned towards the control panel, my finger outstretched to coax the doors closed. Then, a palpable shift, a subtle disturbance in the cabin's atmosphere, like air displaced by a passing form. It was the distinct, yet unnerving sensation of presence, arriving without sound or warning. No footfall, no breath, no rustle of cloth, yet the very weight within the elevator seemed to alter, to deepen. My gaze darted around. The hallway remained starkly empty. Before my hand could reach the button, the doors slid shut of their own accord. A knot tightened low in my belly. I surveyed the confined space, brushed steel walls reflecting only my own wide-eyed image, the grid of buttons, the impassive glow of the overhead lights. Just me. Alone. Yet not. Perhaps exhaustion played tricks, I told myself, trying to anchor my thoughts to the lit numbers tracking our upward journey as the elevator resumed its climb. The ascent continued, but the peculiar feeling clung to me, an invisible static charge. The conviction that I shared this small chamber intensified. I shifted my weight, listening with an almost painful focus. Silence answered. My eyes saw nothing amiss, but some primal sense insisted on proximity, on another being standing breath close. I reached out again, pressing my floor button with unnecessary force, a gesture of reaffirmation. The light remained steady. The elevator hummed onward, obedient. It stopped again. Another floor, not mine. The doors parted. This time I craned my neck, peering into the deserted hallway beyond. Hello? My voice sounded thin, absorbed by the quiet. I strained to hear any response, any movement. Silence. As I drew back, intending to retreat fully into the car, an unseen resistance met me. Solid pressure blocked my path, precisely where a person might stand. I swept my arm through the space before me. It met something firm yet yielding, invisible. I felt the distinct texture of fabric, coarse like outerwear, a definite shape resisting my motion, though my eyes registered only empty air. Panic flared. I stumbled backward as the unseen presence seemed to step fully inside, forcing me away from the threshold. The doors sealed shut once more. Trapped. My back found the cool metal of the elevator wall. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat slicked my palms. I jabbed the emergency call button. Silence. No crackle of a speaker. No response. I slammed the alarm bell button. Nothing. A frantic energy seized me, and I mashed every floor button in sight, desperate for any stop, any chance to escape. But the presence, I felt it distinctly now, stood between me and the doors, an invisible, insurmountable guard. It was there, undeniably solid, terrifyingly close, yet utterly unseen. "Oh, who are you?" I rasped, the words catching in my dry throat. "What do you want?" Only the low hum of the elevator answered. Hesitantly, I reached out a trembling hand. My fingers brushed against something solid, shaped like a shoulder. I pushed tentatively at first. It pushed back hard. I sidestepped, trying to slip around it towards the controls. An unseen limb, an arm perhaps, pressed firmly into my chest, shoving me backward against the rear wall. I staggered, catching myself before I fell. Again, I hammered the door open button, repeatedly, uselessly. The elevator ignored my frantic pleas, continuing its inscrutable journey. Up, down, I couldn't tell. A wave of nausea rose within me. My breath came in shallow gasps. I yelled then, a raw sound of fear echoing in the small space. Help. Somebody help me. No reply came from beyond the doors, and the presence beside me remained utterly silent. Frustration boiling over, I swung my fist wildly through the air where I sensed it stood. My knuckles connected solidly with what felt like a torso, the impact jarringly real, like striking a human body. The response was immediate and brutal. Strong, invisible fingers clamped around my forearm, twisting with agonizing pressure. A cry tore from my lips. I ceased struggling instantly, and the grip released me. I leaned heavily against the wall, massaging the throbbing ache in my arm. My eyes fell on the emergency intercom panel again. I pressed the button, held it. Dead silence. I wrenched open the small compartment housing the elevator's phone. The handset was there, inert. No dial tone. Lifeless. I slammed it shut. Escape. I had to escape. My gaze went upward to the ceiling hatch, locked tight. I jumped, pulling, fingers scrabbling at the edges, but it refused to yield. As I strained, I felt something grasp my leg, preventing me from climbing higher. I kicked backward instinctively, my heels striking something hard. It retaliated with a violent shove that sent me crashing against the wall. My head struck the metal panel. Stars exploded briefly behind my eyes. Desperate, I turned to the doors, jamming my fingertips into the seam, trying to pry them apart. Millimeter by millimeter, I created a tiny gap. Pooling all my strength, I pulled, my nails bending, muscles screaming. The invisible entity seized my arm again, twisting it sharply away from the doors. Pain lanced through me, forcing me to relinquish my grip. I tried again and again, each attempt thwarted by that unseen, unyielding force. My phone. I fumbled it from my pocket. No signal. Predictable, yet devastating. I tried calling out anyway. Nothing. I switched on its flashlight, sweeping the beam around the small compartment. The light illuminated the familiar. Steel walls, buttons, my own reflection. But when I directed the beam towards the space occupied by the presence, it revealed only empty air. I dangled my keys, swinging them tentatively in front of me. They stopped abruptly in midair, hitting something unseen. I felt a sharp tug as the entity tried to wrench them from my grasp. It succeeded. They clattered onto the floor. I snatched them back before they could be lost. Retreating to a corner, I pressed myself against the cold metal, trying desperately to think. It was invisible, impervious to reason, silent. It responded only with physical force. Slowly, cautiously, I began to edge towards the doors again. The elevator glided to another stop. The doors opened just a sliver, revealing a slice of hallway. My chance. I lunged, throwing my weight forward, aiming for the gap. The presence met my charge, slamming into me, blocking the way. I fought back, flailing, punching, connecting with that solid, unseen form. Bracing myself against the doorframe, I pushed with every ounce of strength I possessed, shoulder and arm straining against the immense pressure holding me back. I squeezed one arm, then my head and shoulder, out into the hallway. Cool, blessedly normal air touched my face. Then came the pull. It grabbed my ankle, yanking me back. I kicked furiously, blindly. My shoe connected hard. The grip slackened for a precious instant. I surged forward, scraping my back raw against the metal edge of the doorframe, not caring about the pain. freedom was inches away. It seized the fabric of my shirt, pulling relentlessly. My fingers slipped on the hallway handrail I'd managed to grasp. A desperate thought surfaced. Surprise it. I momentarily relaxed my struggle, then threw myself forward again with explosive force, gaining precious inches. The sound of tearing fabric reached my ears. I ignored it, pulling, scrambling. My other shoulder cleared the opening. My waist was halfway through. It grabbed my leg again, a vice-like grip. I stomped downward, heel connecting solidly. It released me. With a final, desperate heave, I pulled the rest of my body through the narrow gap. I collapsed onto the hallway floor, skinning my knee on the tiles. Scrambling upright, I grabbed the nearby railing, hauling myself fully clear of the elevator shaft, just as the doors began to slide shut behind me. My heart thundered, breath sawing in my lungs. Silence emanated from the elevator car. I spun around, watching the doors close. Hesitantly, I reached out and pressed the hallway call button. The doors slid open smoothly, revealing a brightly lit, utterly empty elevator. Normal. Sterile. No trace of the invisible assailant. I stared into the vacant space, eyes searching fruitlessly. Nothing. I stepped back, hands trembling uncontrollably. I pressed the call button again. The doors closed, then reopened, perfectly functional, still empty. I stood there for a long moment, gasping for air. The phantom sensations of being grabbed, pushed, held, still vivid on my skin. My wrist throbbed, my arm ached, my head pulsed with a dull pain. But I was out. The elevator held no further appeal. The document, the errand, forgotten, irrelevant. My eyes found the sign for the stairwell. I turned towards it, casting one last fearful glance over my shoulder. Nothing followed. I pushed open the heavy fire door, stepped into the concrete well, and began the long descent, each footstep echoing in the enclosed space. The memory of unseen hands, the pressure of a solid, silent body barring my way, clung to me like a shroud. Eventually, I emerged into the lobby, the same quiet space I'd entered what felt like a lifetime ago. I pushed through the main doors and stepped out onto the pavement. The city air, vast and open, felt like a physical release. My shoulders remained knotted with tension, my shirt damp with cold sweat, my hands still unsteady, but I was outside, alive. I stood for a while, breathing deeply, gazing up at the building's impassive facade, trying to impose logic onto the illogical. There was none to be found. It had simply happened. Turning my back on the place, I walked away, profoundly grateful for the solid ground beneath my feet and the unobstructed air around me. The memory ignites unbidden, a phantom heat behind my eyes. That first dawn after the fire spoke. I, Elias, was ensconced deep within a remote valley, seeking solace in the embrace of solitude, a weekend warrior chasing silence and space. Familiar terrain, visited before, yet that particular night, something coiled around my peace, its grip tightening with the fall of darkness. Late afternoon shadows stretched long fingers across the valley floor as I arrived, the weight of my pack a familiar ache against weary shoulders. An unnerving stillness held the air captive, punctuated only by the distant avian calls and the dry sigh of wind through parched shrubbery. Near a meandering stream, I claimed my ground. a relatively level patch blessed with a pre-existing ring of stones, testament to fires past. Gear deposited, the tent rose under my practiced hand, a 30-minute ritual of securing poles and driving stakes, a fragile bulwark against the unknown. As twilight bled indigo across the sky, the search for fuel commenced. Dampness clung to the fallen branches, littering the immediate vicinity, forcing me deeper, seeking drier kindling sheltered beneath arboreal canopies. My hands grew grimed, scratched by rough bark. Legs protested the constant stooping, yet persistence yielded a respectable pyre's worth. Within the stone circle I arranged the wood. A lighter's click, a stubborn refusal, then another. Finally, a tiny flame tentatively licked at the offered dried leaves. Gentle breaths coaxed it, nurtured it, until it blossomed, spreading along twig edges with a hungry crackle. Seated upon a folded blanket, legs outstretched, I surrendered to the fire's hypnotic dance, its erratic patterns flinging incandescent sparks into the deepening gloom. An initial calm settled, the day's exertion pulling eyelids heavy. Still, I resisted sleep, determined to savor the profound quietude. It was then, gazing into the luminous heart of the blaze, that the anomaly began. Shapes resolved within the flames, not the usual fleeting phantoms of combustion, but distinct contours, faces. Their mouths writhed, opening and closing in silent articulation. Whispers, I felt them, though no words reached my ears. Fatigue, I reasoned initially, blinking hard, rubbing tired eyes. But the forms sharpened, grew undeniable. Leaning closer, my pulse quickened, a metallic dryness coating my tongue. The faces were distorted, anguished, their movements languid and unnatural, as if striving against immense pressure to communicate. Soft, hissing sounds accompanied their spectral mime. The fine hairs on my nape prickled upright. Scrambling to my feet, I stepped back, attempting to shake the unnerving perception. That's when I heard it. A susurrus, intimate as breath against my earlobe. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. Only the vast, empty dark. My breath hitched, shoulders knotting tight. With forced resolve, I turned back to the fire. A log cracked, a sharp report shattering the stillness. The flames flared violently, and the faces reappeared, clearer now, and with them, distinct murmuring. Low, rhythmic, reminiscent of a suppressed chant. Sinking back onto the blanket, palms pressed hard against my thighs, a desperate need to comprehend seized me. I leaned in again, the heat a palpable force against my face. The murmurs gained definition. Fragments emerged. Trail, ravine, follow. Jumbled, disjointed, yet undeniably there. My chest constricted, heart pounding a frantic tattoo I feared might rupture bone and flesh. A frantic scan of the surroundings revealed only impenetrable darkness and the silhouettes of nearby bushes. No one. The voices emanated from the fire itself. Rising once more, I backed away further. Instantly, the flames surged higher, licking hungrily at the air, seeming to reach for me. A wave of intense heat washed over my face, stinging my eyes. More words surfaced, coalescing around notions of an old path, a precipitous drop into a deep fissure in the earth. I knew of a ravine nearby, a place I'd deliberately avoided on previous treks. A knot of icy panic tightened in my gut. My legs trembled. Breath came in shallow gasps. I resolved to walk away, turn my back on the phenomenon. But I managed only a few paces before the fire erupted in brilliance, transforming from a simple campfire into a miniature furnace. Light poured forth, shaping itself into an incandescent tunnel, a corridor of glare and searing heat aimed directly at me. Arms instinctively rose to shield my face. My eyes watered fiercely. The very air seemed to sizzle. The whispers intensified, multiplying, a cacophony of voices urging me forward toward the ravine. I remember standing frozen, fists clenched, torn between primal fear and a perverse, inexplicable compulsion to obey. Sweat beaded on my forehead, tracing hot paths down my temples. My own pulse throbbed violently in my ears. Turning abruptly, I faced my tent, seeking refuge from that luminous tunnel. The instant my weight shifted, the flames subsided somewhat, a cunning retraction, as if attempting to lure me back. I refused the bait. Darting inside the tent, I fumbled with the zipper, my hands shaking so violently, the simple task became an ordeal. Secured within the canvas shell, I sat in profound darkness, listening to the ragged rhythm of my own breathing. Outside, the faint crackling continued, the whispers now muffled, indistinct, yet undeniably present. Cross-legged, staring into the void, I fought to regain composure, my chest aching with tightness. Slow, deliberate breaths gradually eased the frantic pounding in my ears. Eventually, the fire outside waned, its glow against the tent walls fading to nothing. Exhaustion finally claimed me, though my mind buzzed with a disquieting mixture of terror and confusion. I drifted into uneasy sleep, clinging to the hope that morning would restore normalcy. Sunrise found me stiff-necked, my back protesting the uneven ground. Unzipping the tent flap released the scent of damp ash into the cool morning air. The fire pit was merely a collection of charcoal and charred sticks within its stone boundary, utterly mundane. The valley's familiar hush surrounded me. I tried to rationalize the night's events as fatigue-induced hallucinations, but approaching the pit sent a fresh chill down my spine. The patterns on the scorched charcoal seemed unnervingly deliberate, echoing the contorted shapes of the fire faces. Rubbing my arms against the lingering unease, I packed with frantic efficiency, desperate to vacate the spot. My palms were clammy. My gaze darted constantly toward the tree line, anticipating unseen eyes. Backpack slung, I began the trek back, each footfall resonating with a dull throb in my head. The trail was deserted. Home offered superficial comfort. Gear stowed, a long, hot shower sluiced away the trail grime, but not the internal residue. Muscles screamed their soreness, yet familiar walls provided a fragile sense of security. For days, I actively suppressed the memory, immersing myself in routine. Work, mindless television, a deliberate performance of normality. Then, a power outage plunged my apartment into darkness. I lit a candle. As the small flame stabilized, casting flickering shadows, I heard it. A low, insidious murmur. I froze, mouth instantly dry, gaze locked onto the tiny, wavering light. The whisper, though faint, possessed the same chilling cadence I'd heard in the valley. With a sharp intake of breath, I snuffed the flame, heart hammering. Darkness was preferable. My mind raced. Was I losing my grip? Yet, the sound had been utterly real. From that moment, fire became a conduit. Lighting a match, a gas burner, even flicking a lighter. Each ignition summoned the voices. Always the same soft, insistent chanting. The same urging toward unknown destinations. References to trails surfaced, whispers of gorges, hollows hidden within the earth. Scattered words yet possessed of an unnerving urgency. An aversion bloomed into a phobia. Cooking shifted to the electric stovetop. Cold meals became common. Flashlights replaced candles. Matches and lighters were banished. Avoidance became instinct. Yet, vigilance sometimes failed. An afternoon barbecue at a friend's house. I tried to refuse assisting with the grill, but he was insistent. The moment the propane ignited with a whoosh, the whispers flooded my senses. I recoiled, dropping the lighter, stammering an excuse about a burned finger. My heart pounded violently as I retreated, the soft chanting a persistent hum beneath the cheerful conversation. Feigning the need for something from my car, I fled the yard, skin tingling, forehead damp despite the mild air. A fabricated headache served as my exit strategy. Weeks bled into months, marked by a heightened jumpiness. Open flames became objects of dread. A stranger lighting a cigarette across the street prompted averted eyes. The candle aisle in the grocery store was territory to be circumvented. Nightmares became frequent visitors, vivid replays of the campfire faces, their whispered commands pulling me toward the shadowed ravine. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart slamming against my ribs, limbs rigid with remembered fear. A morbid curiosity warred with the terror. What secrets did that valley hold? Could research illuminate the whispers of old paths and hidden rituals? I haunted the local library, poring over trail guides and regional histories, seeking any anomaly, any mention of strange ravines or clandestine sites. Nothing. Standard topography, well-trod paths. Inquiries directed at seasoned local hikers yielded only shrugs. The valley was quiet, occasionally windy, utterly unremarkable. Returning home from these fruitless searches, I'd find myself sweating, face flushed, hands trembling. Even reading about the area seemed to stir the dormant whispers in my mind's ear. Simple tasks became difficult. An unsettling sense that something watched, waited, perhaps intended to compel me toward fire, led to obsessive checking of locks. The next near encounter occurred when a neighbor, tending a small backyard bonfire, requested help managing branches. Stepping closer to the heat, my stomach churned, my throat constricted. A faint ringing filled my ears. Amidst the fire's cheerful crackle, the whispers surfaced, faint but distinct, murmuring of a path near a waterfall, concealed behind stone. My knees weakened. Muttering an apology, I retreated, leaving my neighbor bewildered. Back inside my own house, door shut tight, breath coming fast. I listened to the frantic thrumming in my chest. Sleep became increasingly elusive, haunted by a persistent, irrational pull back toward the valley. Tossing in sweat-dampened sheets, I'd entertain fantasies of driving out there, just observing the campsite from a safe distance. But the memory of the fire's sentient malevolence, its beckoning tunnel of light, always asserted itself. Fear of losing control, of succumbing to the whispers should I confront that presence again, kept me anchored in reluctant safety. One tempestuous evening, I reached a threshold. The electricity flickered and died. My trusty flashlight, retrieved from a drawer, cast only a feeble, dying beam. No spare batteries. The sole remaining option, a candle. I stared at it for long moments, a silent battle raging within, teeth clenched, neck rigid. Finally, yielding to necessity, I struck a match. The instant the wick caught, the murmur began. My jaw locked. A wave of heat radiated through my chest. My scalp tingling. I listened, captive, as the whispers reiterated their siren song. Follow the trail. Find the place where the earth falls away. With a choked gasp, I blew out the flame, plunging myself back into darkness, the voice still echoing in the sudden silence, sweat cooling on my temples. Impulsively, I grabbed my car keys, needing air, needing distance. The storm-lashed roads were slick mirrors reflecting streetlights. Gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white, breath ragged, I drove aimlessly, the empty passenger seat beside me feeling unnervingly charged. Rain hammered the windshield, wipers struggling to clear arcs in the deluge. Nearly an hour passed before I returned home, nerves still frayed, the sense of being pursued lingering. It remains thus. Fire is forbidden territory. Witnessing others tend flames induces a visceral tightening in my chest. Every encountered spark, every flicker, carries the potential for that voice, whispering its unchanging litany of hidden paths, deep terrestrial scars, and obscure rituals. My nights are restless landscapes of anxiety. My days are tightrope walks of avoidance. The valley remains unvisited, a place of potent dread and magnetic pull. Something there wants me, of that I am certain, but the courage to face it remains elusive. Explaining this to a doctor, a therapist, feels futile. The inevitable diagnoses of stress, hallucination, would fall short. This is no mere figment. I know what I heard, what I continue to hear, if I dare let my mind conjure the image of a flame. The memory is branded onto my senses, my body reacting as if perpetually crouched by that malevolent fire, captive to its spectral faces and insidious words. There is no cessation, no ignoring it. I exist alongside it, navigating each day with the hope of avoiding the trigger. Sometimes I succeed. Sometimes necessity or carelessness forces an encounter with a match, a lighter, and the whispers return, immediate and insistent. That night in the valley irrevocably altered the texture of my reality. Why the flames birthed those visages, why their whispers fixate on that ravine, remains an agonizing mystery. I only know they do. I know I am bound to it. It is a constant presence, hovering just beyond perception, awaiting the spark that grants it voice. To describe it feels inadequate, reductive. It possesses no poetry, no symbolism. It is simply there, a real voice, born of real fire, commanding me toward a place I fear to tread. It is here. It is real. I hear it. I feel its pull. And I doubt I will ever light another fire without listening for its return.